Welcome to Coaching Kidlit, a podcast about writing and publishing good kidlit.
We dig into various aspects of writing craft through a kidlit lens and provide inspiration and clear, actionable items to help writers like you move forward on their kidlit writing journeys.
I'm Sharon Skinner, author accelerator, certified book coach, and author of speculative fiction and kidlit, including picture books, middle grade, and young adult.
And I'm Christy Jerath, author accelerator, certified book coach, and story editor, focusing on kidlit, including middle grade and young adult. Hey, Sharon.
Hey, Christy, how are you?
I'm good. What are we going to talk about today?
We have another amazing guest this episode. I'm very excited. We have Harshita Jerath with us today, and she's the author of picture books, The Leaping Ladoo and Cooler Than Lemonade. And she also has an early reader out called A Sweet Diwali, which came out the end of last year. She writes stories that blend elements from her Indian heritage with the experiences of life in the United States. She lives with her family in Scottsdale, Arizona, and her website is HarshitaJerath.com. And we'll put that in the show notes. But right now, I just want to welcome to our show, Harshita. It's so great to have you here.
Same here. Thank you so much, Sharon and Christy. Hello, everybody. Hello and namaste to lovely listeners. Thank you for having me over. I'm super excited to be here and I can't wait to share my journey with your listeners.
Well, we're excited to have you. And today we're going to dig into a little bit about your writing journey. But what really excited me about bringing you on the program is to have you talk about how you're blending cultures in the books that you're writing. So you're taking American stories and some cultural aspects of your background, and you're combining them in these wonderful books. And I would really love to hear a little bit about how you came to work that way.
So, to give listeners a little background, I grew up in India and I moved to the US after my marriage. So, it was pretty natural that the culture that I grew up in, that I was surrounded by, naturally seeps into the stories that I write. So, for the listeners, I would like to explain what is culture. Culture basically is a combination of the things that we see and we don't see. So, it is the language, it's the clothes, it's the food, basically the worldview, everything that we are surrounded by forms a culture. And that naturally, organically seeps into the stories that I write. So, like you said, Sharon, you will see both two threads pretty much woven into my stories, the thread of culture and also the thread of universality, the themes that would resonate with the broader audience. So you'll see this duality reflected in the stories that I write.
Your debut picture book is called The Leaping Ladoo, and I love it because I grew up on The Gingerbread Man. And this story takes elements of that story that I think many of us are familiar with, but it brings your Indian culture into it in a really spectacular and beautiful way. What was the impetus of you coming up with that idea?
Okay, so what happened for this is the idea was growing inside me for several years because I was traveling to India with my toddler kids all the time. So I read in all the mom books that when you are going out of the comfort zone of kids on a long travel, you need to prepare them in advance. And in order to do so, I would tell them in advance that once we land in India, what are the things they would be seeing. So as soon as they get out of the airport, I would say, there would be loud noises, there will be honks, you will see probably a wedding procession. So I would just prepare them in advance of the differences that they would encounter as soon as we get out of the airport. So that was when the story idea was planted. I'm like, that would be amazing, right? To have a story that children would be able to read and encounter all these integral parts of streets of India, basically. So that is how the idea came into being. But I wasn't sure how to put it in a story format. I was clear about the elements that I want to show, but it was just stuck as an idea at that point in time. So one of the days, what happened was I was making laddu for my son. Laddu is an Indian round-shaped dessert, and my son loves it. So I was shaping it in my hand, and one laddu actually fell from my hand. So at that time, it just struck me. It was like an aha moment, an Indian gingerbread man. And that was the moment I was able to integrate that story idea into this classic gingerbread man story. And I quickly noted it down on my notepad. I keep one in my kitchen because that's where I get maximum story ideas. So I quickly noted it down. I noted the imagery also because I was very clear that this is what I wanted to show in the book. And it flowed amazingly because of the cumulative structure of the story that Gingerbread Man offers. And also because I introduced so many new things for readers who are not acquainted with Indian streets. So they would see different imagery, they would see even a new language. I've integrated Hindi language in the story. So a lot of newness is there in that. And so it worked perfectly because there is a known foundation of a classic story where readers know what to expect with all the newness that goes around with it. So that's how it came into being, the Leaping Ladoo.
So you weren't trying to think of a familiar structure first. It came the other way around, and then you were like, oh, this totally works.
Yes.
That's great.
That's a really good approach to it. And I do love that you have the Hindi glossary in the back of the book and you have the words so we understand them in context and we get to understand how to pronounce them correctly. I think that that is really fabulous. And a recipe for laddu, which who doesn't like a good recipe, right?
Yes, absolutely. If you would see that somehow I realized that food always shows up in all my books.
I noticed that.
Well, you did say your best ideas come in the kitchen, so
Yeah. So that is why. And I am a foodie. I enjoy good food. I like to cook food. And I feel food is a big connector. That's where all great conversations happen and that's where connections are made. So yeah, it shows up. Can't help it.
You actually bring the kulfi, right, into Cooler Than Lemonade as part of the story.
Yes, kulfi for listeners who do not know, it's the Indian frozen dessert, very similar to ice cream. And that shows up in my second book called Cooler Than Lemonade.
So, what inspired you to write Cooler Than Lemonade? Did that also come out of the kitchen or was that something else?
Yes and no, because the idea was inspired by my younger son who keeps coming up with big ideas to earn money. So one day I still remember, it was pretty hot in Phoenix, Arizona, July. And he came to me and said, what if we open a kulfi stand at a farmer's market? So that is how the first idea was planted. So what started as a project to help him to open a kulfi stand actually led to creation of this book. So he never ended up opening a kulfi stand at a farmer's market, but thanks to him, I have a book now.
well, his idea is immortalized forever.
In Cooler Than Lemonade, I like how you took the idea of the kulfi stand, but instead of just going straight there, you started with the lemonade stand as an idea for the business and then kind of brought it along. Spoiler alert, Kulfi enters in toward the end of the story, but did some of that conversation around opening a stand and all of the ins and outs and what it would take when you were talking to your son, did that also enter in as you were developing this story?
Yes, the story that you see right now, it wasn't like that initially. The initial draft, the setting was in a farmer's market. And I wrote several drafts with the setting in farmer's market where the kid opens a kulfi stand. But that wasn't the direction I wanted the story to go in because I didn't have enough knowledge about opening something at a farmer's market. So it involved taking a license, it involved so many things that I wasn't sure if I wanted to include it in my story. What I wanted in the big idea of the story was to introduce children to running a business, what it involves at a higher level, introduce concepts of entrepreneurship. So during that time, I started reading all about entrepreneurship so that I could guide my son. I read different kind of books. I even read entrepreneurial magazines, everything I could. So what started in farmers market ended with a lemonade stand, because I realized all the concepts I want to introduce are much easier in that setting of a lemonade stand. So the challenge after that was how to make my book stand out, because there were already so many picture books related to lemonade stand. I wanted my book to be different. And my brain was really working that I have all these concepts that I wanted to introduce children to. And it came about using this structure.
So you have the competitive structure of the kid across the street or down the street who's also opening a lemonade stand, and then the pricing that goes back and forth and all of those kinds of things. I think that that's a really great way to introduce kids to the idea of retail and sales and how to run a business and all of those sorts of things. You can see that you had a lot of ideas about what it takes to have a small business in there, but you simplified it beautifully for a picture book. And I think that some of those concepts really come across in the illustrations and not necessarily in the text.
Yes, yes. So we had a great collaboration, me and the illustrator Chloe Burgett. She's done a beautiful, gorgeous job. It came out beautifully. So there were some notes that I had mentioned. So that something that I had not written is there. For example, the cost, like 99 cents versus a dollar. It's not written in words, but it's right there because it's a very stiff competition. And there are some things that she added on her own. The end papers have their own story. If you see that before and after, the entire story is an end paper. She's done a gorgeous job in that. Then the cover, there is a surprise cover too. So it has two covers. Publisher loved both the covers, and now my book has two covers, so which was exciting. And the interplay of emotions between Eva and her little brother, Aru, all those things have come out beautifully. I love a page where the competition is so evident. The competitor, Jake, shows up with bodyguards and free cookies and all those additions. So I just love the way she added all those details, and it's come out really nice. The story has come together very well.
I love that illustration that you're talking about with the bodyguards and everything, because it really shows how the competition escalates. And she's really struggling to figure out how to make things work when this kid, he's just got it going on until she finally figures out how to make this work. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the concepts that you were able to bring into a picture book realm? Because a lot of these concepts are higher level concepts that we don't normally see in picture book.
Absolutely, Sharon. It was quite an effort. Let me tell you this because I did a lot of research, and for any picture book, because picture books are so great because you have to simplify the idea. All the complex ideas need to be simplified for kids to understand. And in doing so, even adults understand that part. So what happened was, like I said, I wanted to introduce all business concepts as much as possible. So it starts with idea generation. So Eva, the main character, she comes up with big ideas to solve problems, basically. So she comes up with the idea of lemonade stand in hot summer. So it starts with how to generate ideas. So I wanted kids to understand that what are the various ways ideas can be generated. And that's what you see in this book as Eva tries to generate different kind of ideas. She brainstorms, she meditates, she doodles, she's being creative in coming up with ideas. And then she opens a lemonade stand, encounters competition from her neighbor, and then they get into a rabbit hole of this competition. Who's better? Who's gonna do something? And Jake also has really big ideas. So it was really challenging for Eva to stay put. I wanted to show that it is real, like competition. When you open a business, competition happens and there would be a failure. So there can be, right? You have to fail in order to move forward. So that's when all is lost and Eva has to wrap her business And she is like, okay, I can't open a lemonade stand anymore. So she just closes her lemonade stand. So I wanted to show that in my book, that embracing failure. And she is really low and she's not able to come up with any more ideas. She was supposed to, because that's how she's shown in the book, that she always keeps coming up with brilliant ideas. But now she doesn't have any ideas because she just lost her creativity, until she's helped by her little brother who nudges and asks her to be creative again by making kulfi. And that's when she's in that creative space after taking a pause. She's back in her zone and she understands that, okay, now this is another idea she can work with. She's back in business. And you will see that she's doing a structured experimentation all the time. That was another concept I wanted to introduce, design thinking. So once she has an idea, she takes the idea, she forms a prototype, she makes kulfi, she shares it with family, with other people who give her star rating, and then she launches it in the world. So, structural experimentation, and then finally launching the product in the new world. And I also wanted to show that there are different ways to succeed in life or in business. There's not just one way. So, it's a story of originality also. And in the end, what starts as a competition ends with a collaboration. What starts as a classic lemonade stand ends with kulfi and lemonade together.
I love the collaboration at the end. I love how that's how they figure out how to work together.
So then the way that you had her take her special, unique culture and blending that in was ultimately what makes her succeed. Is that sort of a lesson you also wanted kids to take away from that?
Not about the culture, but more about being original or not just following the race. Because you have to come up with your own originality in business. What sets you apart? It just happens that culture is part of it because that's what I know, or what we live, what my kids live. So that's how it comes into the picture. But my idea was more to show that, like I said, there are different ways to succeed, not just one way.
So you have two picture books. How did it come to be that you then moved into writing an early reader?
It was something I want to try. I want to explore in children's literature. So when this opportunity came in being, I saw that Highlights is offering a class in writing early readers, and I jumped into, and I really enjoyed, and I already had stories that align with the early reader, and it all worked out.
So you took the class and you wrote the story, and you were already agented for your picture books. And was the same agent engaged for the early reader?
Yes, same agent. And there aren't many publishers who do early readers, so it was very limited. And it's a different ball game entirely. Even though early readers are also books with pictures, but they are written differently and their market is different because, see, picture books are designed to be read by parents or adults to children. Pretty much that's the design of the picture books. They can be read by children alone, but typically they're designed to be read by an adult to a child, while early readers are designed to be read by child. That's first independent reading experience. So the way they are written is quite different than the picture books. So it was challenging, but really fun challenge. The way this story came into being is it's inspired by my childhood pet. I used to call him Dollar. It's funny though, right? In India, a dollar. He was named after Richie Rich magazine. So these stories are inspired by my pet dog, Dollar. So I have plenty of stories pertaining to my pet dog, and my agent submitted more than one story, and they picked up this Diwali story to be published. Yeah.
So how did you get into writing in the first place? What inspired you to start writing for children? I mean, obviously specifically, but writing more in general.
Like it said, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a small step. And the first step was when I was a kid, I used to maintain a diary. And I would write all my thoughts there, feelings. And the first time I opened a Hallmark card and I read the verses in it, that was very inspiring to me. And I felt that the words can be so powerful. So I tried to emulate the same thing in my writing journal or diary at that time when I was a kid. And that was the first small step, I would say. My first attempt at writing my own poetry. I didn't take writing as a career. Only after having kids, when I took break from my corporate career, that's when the desire to write rekindled. And then I took my second small step in this journey, which was to open my blog. That was the first step in sharing my writing with the world. So I opened my blog. It was, I think, in the year 2016 is when I did this. The third small step that led me to this journey was around the same time when my husband gifted me a course in writing because he saw my interest in writing and he gifted me a course which was writing for children's market. Once I took that course, there was no looking back, and I completely got immersed in this writing for children. So that's how it started, and I found my agent in end of 2019, and then the first book came out in 2022, second in 23, and the third one, and it was last year.
And how did you find your agent?
Through Twitter. At that time, there used to be lots of pitches, right? Twitter pitches. It was one of the pitch. I can't remember which one it was, but it was some picture book pitch, and I pitched my Leaping Ladoo story, and I got a heart on it, and that's how I got to meet my agent, and since then we are together.
So you never know how, as long as you're out there seeking the resources and you're making the connections, you never know how it's going to play out, right?
That's true. I feel this writing is a passion project, completely fueled by passion, because it can take several years. A lot of time can go by without signing any deals, without your books being published. So you have to really love and fuel it with your passion.
So, what are you working on next? Are you sticking with picture books or are you working on more early readers?
Both. I'm also trying my hands on early chapter books. So I'm just trying out different things. And there are a few picture books that I'm working on. One of them is in submission mode and another in revision. So I have a pipeline. At least I try to keep things in pipeline.
So, Harshita, what is your process when you're working on a project?
It starts with an idea for me. Just like Eva, the main character in Cooler Than Lemonade, she keeps coming up with ideas. And when she's creative, that's when the ideas come to her. But when she isn't, the ideas stop coming to her. Pretty much it's true for me also. So when I'm in a creative state of mind, I'm open to ideas and I keep noting them down, whether they make sense or not. I have a notepad in my kitchen. Then I also store it in the notepad on my phone. So I keep a list of running ideas. So there are times when I have no ideas, but then there are times when in one day I can get so many ideas. So it starts with an idea, and not all ideas turn to books or stories, right? Some just stay there for years, for months, and maybe they will not form a story at all. But some of them are very clear to me. They're like the Leaping Ladoo, it all clicked together. And I even had the imagery in mind. And for Cooler Than Lemonade, I had the theme, right? I knew I wanted to share running a business, entrepreneurship. And I also knew that the character would be driven like my son. So I had the character as well as the theme in mind. And from there, I kept trying different ways to write the story. Same thing for A Sweet Diwali. I had stories from my memories growing like my pet dog. And I just found a way to share it as an early reader because didn't have too much tension, the stories not much conflict, just easy enough. So perfect for early reader. So it all starts with an idea for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something we say all the time, right? A lot of times it's a moment and an idea, but it's not a story. And even though picture books seem easy, they're not. And finding that thing that's going to actually turn it into a story that can be read aloud and enjoyed and followed and gives the illustrator stuff to work with, it takes time and it's hard.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Christy, because for picture books, one thing I feel is very important is relatability to children. Even if there is an idea, but if it is not relatable to kids of that age, then that idea will not turn into a picture book or into a full-fledged story. And picture books are different, right? Because they need to appeal to both adults and children, right? That's what makes them a little different than other genres because adults buy them for children. So in some way, you need to have a appealing factor for adults who are buying the books as well.
It's true. We talk all the time about having a target reader in mind, but for picture books, you really have two target audiences that you kind of have to balance between.
Absolutely, I agree. So, for that, what I do is when I am writing, I always keep adults in mind, even though the prime audience are children. So, adults are always there, back of my mind, because when I was choosing books for children, I would think, will my child enjoy it, find it engaging? But at the same time, first it hits me, right? It comes through me, I filter it, and then it reaches to my child. So the same concept I apply when I am writing, when I'm on the other side, that I keep it in my background. How will an adult accept the book?
Right. When we talk about the gatekeepers and who it is that we have to get through, and the older the child gets, the more likely you can get it into their hands. But for sure, with picture books and early readers, unless you're at the Scholastic Book Fair and you have a bracelet that comes with it, then the kid is not usually the one that's picking that up. It is definitely, it's an adult. As you know, we always like to leave our listeners with an action item so that they can apply what they've gleaned from our conversation. So what is it that you would love to leave our listeners with today?
I have a tip. We kind of touched upon it during our discussions. I want to say invest enough time in choosing the right story structure for your idea. So even if you have a amazing idea, but not the right story structure that would illuminate it, your story would not move forward the way you want it to be. So I will explain it to you what I mean by it. So, for example, take my first book, The Leaping Ladoo. The idea was introducing the streets of India to children, and I had imagery. I knew the key elements I want to show in that book, which were the chai vendor, would see a wedding procession, dancing girls, all those kids playing game of cricket. So I had identified the key elements that propelled my story forward, but it didn't really turn into a real story until I identified the story structure for it. So once I figured out that it would work best in a cumulative story structure format, that's when everything clicked in and it turned into a book and it got sold. So that's what I mean, that identifying the right structure for your idea is very important. So that was book number one. For book number two, Cooler Than Lemonade, I started with the theme of sharing entrepreneurship concept and character inspired by my son. And I tried different things, and what worked for it was a classic story structure. If you see that the main character does several failed attempts, and there's all is lost moment, and in the end, everything is tied together. That's a classic story structure. And similarly, for a Sweet Diwali, which is an early reader, I had different stories about my pet. I wanted a story structure that doesn't have too much of conflict, easy to read. And I found that early reader, which comes in series because I have different stories to tell, would be perfect for this. So when you have a story idea, and it is not progressing, the story is not progressing, one thing authors or writers can look at is seeing if they have planted it in the correct story structure format. So there can be circular story structure, classic, cumulative. There are then how-to story structures. Now, picture books can be written in a letter format. So just try, experiment, and see which story structure would help bring out the story you would like to share with the world.
That's a great action item.
I love that. That was very informative. Sharon, what do you got?
So for my action item, it's adjacent to what Harshita you just went over. I would recommend that if you have an idea for a story or a seed for a story, that you dig into your own experience and find those things that resonate from your own experience that might feed that story and that story structure that you're talking about. So the way that you've combined your different cultural experiences from two different countries. We all have different kinds of experiences throughout our lives where we've experienced different things in different ways. And I would recommend that if you have a seed for an idea, that you start to explore it through those different lenses of your experience and how you've viewed things in the world. You can look at it from a kid lens or from an adult lens or from a school child lens or from a work lens, but from your personal experiences, a travel lens, if you've gone to other countries. There are so many ways that you can look at that story and pull it into a very personal space.
That's great. I love that too, because that's taking the things that Harshita was talking about earlier with taking what's you, what's original, and what's creative, and combining that to make the story that only we can tell in the way that we can tell it. I think that's a great way to do that.
Yeah, and is that's what forms our unique voice, I would say. Voice, our fingerprint, very unique to us.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to give you a more practical one, taking what both of you have done. What you're making me think of is having two running lists going of different types of story structures and then also ideas, and then looking at those together, like, okay, is there anything that's jumping out at me? But kind of to do that, I think taking a step back and going and looking at picture books, mentor text, to see what is this stories that I like and what structure are they using and how are they approaching that, and maybe taking notes on that to see the different ways that you can come about that. Because even though you named a couple that form how most picture book and maybe a lot of stories are written, they're all so different in the way that they actually execute that idea. So that's what I would suggest. Is reminds me of grad school and having to do my 100 picture book paper, having 100 picture books lined up in my office and reading all of them to see that while there's universal, there's also the different ways of doing things.
I love that, Christy, because it's very that analytical side of it. And I love the idea of the list because that's actually a combination of how I see you approach a lot of times with your spreadsheet and your data, but also with that puzzle piece that I like where you're trying to connect the dots across. It's sort of like that word match that we used to do as a kid.
Yes. Well, that's what I was imagining as you were explaining your process. So I'm thinking, like, oh, like a list of ideas and then a list of things. And then we're like, okay, I don't know what I want to work on. Like, choose one from column A and choose one from column B. And like, what can you do?
And the idea of looking at your mentor texts and maybe doing a list of how they did it, what was the concept or the theme and what is the structure, and seeing how that lines up can also give you some ideas on how to do that matching. I just think that's great.
Yeah. And hopefully getting you out of that, this is just an idea, and into this is a story stage.
Yeah, actually, as I shared about it, it sounds very clean, but writing in itself is very messy. It just doesn't come that easily, that systematically. You have to do so much of back and forth. And this process, I realized only when I look back and I connected all the dots that this is what I'm doing all the time. So it wasn't like black and white, it's all gray. And between that gray is where we find these little tips or these little ways of doing things differently.
I appreciate hearing that it's messy. It sounds very, oh, you just do this and you just do that. And we talk all the time about craft, and we're constantly giving our listeners some ideas of how to approach these things. But it is messy. It's a creative act, and it also requires a certain level of craft and understanding and that analytical side in order to bring it together into a finished product that is, as you said, relatable and accessible to readers. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. This has been great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our talk, and I hope it's useful to the listeners.
So where can our listeners find you? We will put in the show notes the list of your books and such, but given how things are changing so much lately, where are you on social media, if you are on social media?
I have my website, which is my full name, harshitajerath.com. Then I'm also on Instagram, and my username there is hjerath. And I'm also on Facebook as Harshita Jerath Books and Blog.
Great. We look forward to connecting you with our listeners. And thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And we will see you soon.
Bye for now.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Coaching Kidlit, a writing and book coaching podcast for writers who want to level up their Kidlit writing game. For more about us and to discover what a book coach can do for you, check out coachingkidlit.com and follow us on social media.